The way that I like to look at podcasting is it should be a force multiplier for what you're doing and what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to episode 226 of the Smart Agents Podcast. As always, my name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we're joined by Vince Quinn, founder and creative director at SBX Productions. Following a career in sports talk radio, Vince set out to help businesses leverage podcasting as a marketing tool. Throughout our conversation, Vince shares his tips for launching a show, how to repurpose the content across all your media platforms, and how to determine the success your podcast is having as a lead generation driver. But before we get on with the day's featured interview, if you or someone else on your team has an incredible story of real estate success or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new guests to inspire our listeners. And lastly, if you enjoy this conversation and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. We stream in all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All right, let's get on with our conversation with Vince Quinn. If you're interested in launching your own podcast or improving one you currently host, I highly recommend checking out his podcast, It's Not Just Talking. I've included a link in the episode description.
Well, really the way I like to start everything out is if you could just introduce yourself to us a little bit, kind of tell us who you are, where you're at, and a bit about your journey into podcasting and really teaching people the value of podcasting.
Yeah, so I'm Vince Quinn of SBX Productions. I'm located in Philly, but I work with business owners everywhere. I've got a client in Canada. I got a client in Florida. Like, it's all over the place. So that's the beauty of technologies, you know? So I work with people everywhere. But the whole idea is it's really about podcast strategy on the highest level. So for everybody, so many people start podcasts because the ease of access is incredibly low, right? You can do it on your phone if you want. You can do it on a laptop with GarageBand that's already built into your MacBook. Like, the access is so simple, but I think what people realize is once they start to do the work, how hard it can be. So how do you do this in a way that is manageable for you, right? And actually connects with your business? Because sometimes people will go and do this show and they've been doing it for 2 years and they're like, well, I'm not seeing any results. So how does this work for me? Like, why am I not seeing results? And then you realize, like, you're not even talking about your business on the show. So how do you do it in a way that, is sustainable so you get the long run? How do you do it in a way that actually connects with your business and gives you real results, honestly, whether you're getting like the big listeners and sponsors or not? Because so many people are focused on that idea. The number of times I talk to a business owner who wants to start a podcast and they say, well, yeah, my goal is to get some sponsors on it. It's like, that should not be your goal.
Right.
Like that is a byproduct of having a good show. You need to do, this is your marketing. So if you talk to any other business owner in any other category and they're saying, well, yes, I'm planning to get a sponsor for my marketing. Like, you realize how absurd that sounds, right? Like, it's just not how it typically works. So how do you do this in a way that you're getting automatic wins? Like, doing this podcast is something that, as a result, whether people are listening or not on a big level, how can I tangibly say that this is making my life better, improving my business? And that's what I help people do.
Awesome. So, I mean, how did you get into that? Because I think it's definitely something that there had to be something that sparked your interest in it or kind of led you down that path.
Yeah, so 10 years in sports talk radio is actually the start of it. And now that I've said that, you're probably like, oh, yeah, his voice does sound like radio. So, I did sports talk radio for 10 years is actually how this all began. I was an obsessive. I mean, I started in promotion. So I was the guy that was like, if you went to an Eagles game, there's a tent in the parking lot with a prize wheel and spin the wheel. I was that guy. So I was handing out T-shirts and stuff, but I wanted to be in television or entertainment, and I was writing jokes and doing comedy and all this different stuff. And I was a sports nut. So I happened to get a job at this radio station. And I realized after about a year or so that people who had been in promotions found their way over to being producers and being hosts. And I was like, I want that. I'm doing that. Like, I was already hosting my own podcast. So talking about sports. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And so I pretty much spent all my time for the better part of 10 years just like being completely obsessed with radio, having as many conversations as I could with people in the building. I mean, we had broadcasters that had the number one show in Philly or number two show in Philly for 30 years. Like, that's so hard to do in radio. So to be able to have people like that in a big sports obsessed town that I could talk about, not sports really, but the nuances of being a host. Like, how do you set up a topic? How do you deal with guests in a certain way? And ask the right questions to get a conversation where you want it to go? How do you deal with having multiple people on a show and like all these other things? So I learned so much about the nuance of conversation, of connecting with people, of doing it in a way that was accessible, having really sharp points. And like all of that is something that allowed me to climb the ladder pretty quickly. So I went from, handing out t-shirts at bars to just a couple of years later, by the time I was 29, I had a nationally syndicated show. I was on CBS Sports Radio. I had 225 stations all across the U.S. and Canada. It was my show. It was the Vince Quinn show, which is like crazy. I was shocked when that happened. But that whole background of spending all of this time in radio, being in the business, being a producer, so being behind the scenes, doing editing, making sound bites, like it all came together. And it got to a point where I saw where the radio business was going, which not great. If you haven't checked it, it's not great. It's not doing very well. I don't regret anything about leaving. And I had the chance to go all in and apply those skills to the modern version of it in podcasting. So I've been doing that for about 4 years now. And I've been running the business for 3 of them. At this point, working at multiple studios in the city. So I have like different partnerships with co-working space and stuff like that. Like it's really evolved in a beautiful way. But it was a lot of being an obsessed student of conversation, essentially, and production. And then it all just came together.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for our listeners, real estate agents and brokers, when it comes to podcasting, there's so many different things that you can do, but I'd like to kind of dive into how you can use a podcast to, build up your brand and, really kind of be a strong marketing tool for you.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is there's so many different ways you can apply this. And the way that I like to look at podcasting is it should be a force multiplier for what you're doing and what you want to do, right? So let's say you're writing articles or you're posting on social media all the time. You want to get reels out on social media. Great. Use the podcast as a means to get effective content that you can use for those posts. And if you have a newsletter, put that transcript and repurpose the transcript into a newsletter. Like it makes it so much simpler this way, because I think the biggest problem, and I've dealt with this myself, is you have all these different channels. So you've got 3 different social media accounts. You do have a newsletter. You've got your website. Like it's just, okay, I feel like I have to create a new thing for each platform. What I'm doing on LinkedIn is this new original post that I'm coming up with right now and writing it. And maybe I schedule it a day or 2 in advance and maybe I don't. So like it's exhausting when you do it that way. And I think the fundamental issue is your information should be applicable everywhere in your messaging, right? Like there might be slight changes if for some reason you have like very different audiences on different platforms, but for the most part, like the easiest, soundest way is you have the same audience that you're generally looking for. It's on all of these platforms and your message will resonate on all of those platforms. So do the podcast. That's your centralized thing. It gives you audio. It gives you video. You get the transcript. So you can apply it anywhere that you need to. So I think from a marketing standpoint, like I just launched my own show because I spent so much time doing this for other people. And I'm looking around and I'm like, man, I need to get my marketing stuff together. I've talked to some agencies that were helping me out at all. So I was like, I'm doing my own show. Like, what am I talking about? So I did my own podcast. I've been doing it now for just a month and a half. This is a new launch, but to talk about the swings of volume of what you can get from it. So I went from posting basically nothing to, in my first month, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have a newsletter. We have a YouTube channel. So between all of those things, we were able to generate over 100 posts in a single month from 5 podcasts. And that's the beauty of saying, all right, here's a couple of clips that are really good from this episode. We're going to post 2 or 3 clips from this show. That doesn't even include the newsletters where we got the transcripts. I have a newsletter that goes out every week. The podcast is then informing the newsletter, like driving the core of the content, but is also not the same as the episode that is out that week. So I'm getting complementary things, but they'll get that information delivered to them 2 different ways in different weeks. So it's like, it's so nice to be able to have diversity, but it's all from this same simple thing that you spend maybe 10 minutes on and you can put all over the place. So like, that's one of the biggest things of marketing is just simplifying the processes and boiling it down to this is my starting point and I'm just putting that same message everywhere. And, there's a lot of ways you can go with it beyond that too.
Right. Absolutely. And, I love what you said there about, really it comes down to having a starting place for, that content to be kind of born from. and then, be able to distribute it to all the different platforms, because it is overwhelming when you have so many different platforms and you feel like, oh, I got to show up everywhere. But there's only so much time in the day. And for an agent, at the end of the day, my job is to be out face to face with clients, not necessarily, behind the microphone all the time, or, coming up with the next piece of content. So being able to, kind of build that content base up with the podcast, I think is a great tool.
Yeah, it's just simple and automatic, right? Like so yesterday my schedule got a little bit funky. I ended up taking a shower as soon as I was done work at 5 o'clock. I get out of the shower and I realize I'm brushing my teeth. And I'm doing that because it's automatic. You know what I mean? So it's like that simplicity and automation is really where you want to be. It doesn't have to be every time, oh, now I've logged into LinkedIn, now I need to come up with this new thing. It's like, no, I've already got the stuff and I'm just dropping it everywhere that it needs to be, and it feels natural to do that. So that's one of the things. But then otherwise, I mean, networking is marketing, right? Like, especially when you are the business or you're driving the business and you have these customer relationships, you're doing one-on-one work, you're selling directly, whatever it might be, like everything that you're doing networking wise is huge. And obviously people podcast all the time for networking purposes. So if you can get a show, and I think especially for real estate, there's a lot of ways to do this where just focus on your community. Like focus on the direct people that you want to do business with, have conversations that are relevant to them that they want to engage with, approach those honestly in terms of like, be actually engaged in what you're talking about and not just say, well, I'm just doing this to get the lead. Like, I just want you to call me 8 months from now. So that's why I'm sitting here and I'll be very polite. Like, actually talk about what you want, be thoughtful in it and contribute to it. And if you can build those relationships up over time, I mean, that is your community. If you're dealing with people who are renting commercial real estate, if you're dealing with smaller families or new families or older people, maybe you have a boomer population and you're helping a lot of them sell their homes. Like, how do you build conversations in a way that connects to those people, builds the relationship, makes them think of you so that when it comes time, they'll give you a call. And like, that's that networking element. And it helps because you have the podcast and you're inviting them on and you're creating a real space for them to have a conversation that's meaningful to them. So that's like that other natural side of, hey, here's how I'm going to use this show, drive my marketing and build real relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. For somebody that might be listening to this and saying, this all sounds really great. I really want to get started. But what, how should I even begin? What are some of those tips to kind of get this actually launched and kind of go through the process of the idea? Like, I know I need to do this, to starting to record episodes, deciding what style you want the show to be.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I love to do is I treat it like television. A lot of times if you have a favorite television show, you watch the first episode and it's called Pilot. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of shows called Pilot. Why is that? No, it's because they have no idea if it's actually going to work or not. It's just, hey, let's invest in this. Let's do one. Let's see if it works. And then if this is good and we all like it and we think it's a great show, great. We're going to move ahead with this and we're going to greenlight it for a season. Like, that is the philosophy that you want to take. This is all trial and error. And when you're doing this show, right, the whole thing is a lot of times people get a bad example from podcasting because a lot of podcasters don't do pilots. What a lot of podcasters do is, hey, I've got this show, I've got this idea, I'm going to design the graphics, I'm going to build the feed, I'm going to tell everybody about it, and then I'm going to put the first episode out there and we're just going to go and we're just going to figure it out. 45% of shows don't make it past 3 episodes. Because they realize that as they're doing it, they're like, this is a complete mistake. So don't do that, right? Like the whole problem is it's not thoughtful. They don't understand the workload. They don't understand what the concept looks like in practice. And to make it worse, it's not only it's a show they're not fully comfortable with or don't really like doing, but they've told everybody about it. And now the show is gone. So don't make that commitment. Do a pilot. And by doing that, what do I mean? Like, the simplest level is come up with an idea that you like. Don't make any graphics. Don't care about that. Don't build a feed. Don't build a YouTube channel. Just do the show. Just do one episode and go, do I like this or not? let me review this. Is this hitting on the things that I wanted to hit on? Is the messaging coming out in a way that actually connects with the people that I want to talk to? Is my background really bad and it looks awful if you're trying to do video, and I should do this episode again? Everything was great, but I'm not doing it in this location. Like, do all of those things, critique it, make sure that you like it, that it looks good, that it sounds good, that you understand the full workload that's involved. Because again, like all the things that we talked about earlier, Michael, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to post this on LinkedIn. I'm going to post this on Instagram. I'm going to do a newsletter. It's going to fill that out. Like, okay, go do that. Like, go do that work. Can you do that work? Are you willing to do that work? And if you're not willing to do that work, do you have somebody that's willing to help you do it? Because if you're not willing to pay for that, then inevitably this is going to run out. You're going to hit a brick wall. You're going to feel like you've wasted all this time. And that's what happens to a lot of people, because they decide to go all in right away. And it's kind of like if a band just decided, hey, you guys want to start a band? All right, our first show's on Tuesday. And it's like, well, we've never practiced together. You know what I mean? So that's how podcasting tends to go. That's why I love pilots so much. It just like simplifies everything. You make sure it's the proper first step. You can make as many tweaks as you need to. You can do 20 pilots if you want before you go live, if that's what you need. And you just take it from there.
Yeah, and I definitely think, understanding the workload, because I think a lot of people don't understand what all goes on, especially if you're doing a lot of this, on your own, and you don't have, a team behind you that is, just even from the finding the guests, like that's a process in itself. The recording of it is actually like a very small portion of the workload and the time that it takes to go from, the formation of the idea to getting it out. And then if you start doing the, cutting the clips and the promotional stuff and all that, like that's a whole other side of things. So understanding that workload, I think, is super important.
Yeah, and being on time with it, right? Because it's all this like, oh, I'm going to do a weekly show. Okay, well, you've done no shows before. You have no production experience. And now you want to go and do a weekly production. Like that is a ton of work. And a lot of times people miss episodes, and then missing episodes gets them discouraged. And you know what I mean? So the other side of that too is it's not just do a pilot, but then do 8 episodes, 6 episodes, 4, like whatever you're comfortable with. Do a block of episodes before you even go live, because then you've got a buffer. You have a break. If you get sick, your kids get sick, you've got to travel out of town. It's summer vacation. It's the holidays, like whatever it might be. You can go, yeah, I could be gone for 2 weeks. And then you just need to get those episodes back in line. You rebuild your buffer and you keep going. But like that peace of mind, because you're running around. I mean, really, for everyone in real estate that I've talked to, it's always like, I got this thing, I got that thing, I'm going here, I'm going there. You're working on the weekend so much. It's such a busy time for so many people. So like when your schedule's all over the place, yeah, you want to, you don't need to add that extra stress to your life. Like this is your marketing. And for anybody else who's doing marketing, it's not like, hey, we need that TV ad up in 30 seconds. It's got to go up now. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It shouldn't be that way. So don't do that to yourself. You got enough stress on your plate. Like make it easy.
Before we dive into our next topic, I have a question. Agents, are you ready to build instant trust with the sellers and buyers you meet? Well, with today's sponsor, Authorify, you can become a published author and gain instant credibility with potential clients. You'll easily win listings, and buyers will want you to represent them as their agent. Imagine handing somebody your book instead of a business card and watching them realize that you're the real deal and want to list with you. Even better, you can try this out for free because Authorify is giving you a free sample book so you can see exactly how it works. Simply go to authorify.com/sample to claim your free sample book now.
For a real estate agent that is deciding, okay, I want to go ahead and start recording some of these episodes. In real estate, I feel like there's so many different ways that you could format your show. You could do absolutely, the interviewing of the local business owners or some of the people in your demographic. And then you can also sprinkle in some more of those, maybe they're not interview styles. It's just kind of you giving, seasonal updates and things like that. So you do have, especially in real estate, I feel like you have the ability to kind of, everything doesn't have to be so formatted. You have, you can kind of mix and match your formats here and there.
Yeah, experimentation is great. And I love everything that you're saying, by the way. I think it's super important to talk about having some solo episodes, because ultimately I think this is where people get lost, following the example of other podcasters who a lot of times have just done guests, because guests are easier. It's so much easier to just be like, so you think this, right? Why do you think that? all right, I'm going to sit here for 4 minutes. Like, but are you building your brand? Are you connecting with anybody? Like, all you're doing is giving a rotating guest platform that's going to tell people to go and follow those people and go to their podcast. That's why they're on your show a lot of times, right? It's like, hey, how can I draw this audience to me? So you got to find ways to get yourself out there, because it is your marketing, and you can make these clips and you can do the newsletters, and like it's an easy way to connect. So yeah, find ways to get your own voice in there 100%. And, otherwise just take the opportunity to think about your messaging. If it's harder for you to figure out what to talk about, what kind of things your audience wants to hear, then you might need more exploration into that. And I think that's what's beautiful about podcasting is it is public messaging. It's how you present yourself. It's public speaking. So how do you relate what you do to other people? Are you doing that clearly? And if you don't know who those people are or what they want to hear, then it allows you to self-reflect on the business. Like your podcast in a lot of ways should mirror your business. Mm-hmm. And if it's not doing that, or you don't know how to do that, then figure out why. And I think that self-scouting can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in real estate, one of the biggest things is you want to come across as that person that's providing value. And if that means that you're the person that is seeking out other experts, to bring it, that's just as important, having that place that as a homeowner or somebody in my market, listening, if I have a place that, houses all of those, can facilitate those conversations, and is that not necessarily the expert themselves, but is the person that is bringing all those experts to one place. I think, that's just as valuable as if it was the solo episodes.
For sure. And I think there's something to be said for the idea of I'm going to explore all this information and talk to these experts and learn new things and help other people do that. Because to me, a lot of the smartest people are the people who admit that they don't know everything and they want to find the answers to those things and are really generally in a state of constantly learning, right? There's just so much you don't know. You can't know everything. And even if you spend every day studying, you just can't learn it all. So to be able to showcase these people and build those connections is great. And the cool thing is too, that can come back to you in the world, right? You might have somebody, when you have guests on, I think what happens a lot of times is people will have the guest churn through it and then they're off and they're on to the next one and that's it. You're just always hunting for the new thing to come through and you're just looking to keep the wheel spinning. But when you can get all those people on in all these different places, you are hitting a lot of different markets and a lot of interesting people, and you never know who knows who. And as long as you're maintaining those relationships too, I think that's the biggest part, right? Following these episodes, once we're done this episode, Michael, I'm hitting you up on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? Let's be connected. Let's follow each other. If you're seeing, if you're making content out there that I think is great, I'm happy to give it a thumbs up. When you build those kinds of relationships and decide, hey, I'm going to meet these people, I'm genuinely interested in what they have to say, I'm going to have a real conversation, then yes, why not stay in touch and see where that goes? The long con in a way is it absolutely is just as important as getting something right now. Why wouldn't you essentially invest in your opportunities by building relationships just from saying hey, I don't have this immediate need. There's not an immediate connection for either of us. There's no money changing hands, but you're cool. I like what you're about. You're interesting. So to facilitate that stuff, build those kinds of connections, think of networking and relationship building like that. It's a great way to go.
Right. Absolutely. I want to ask you about, so once you launch your podcast and you start trying to determine whether or not it is a success or not, I think that can get really overwhelming and cause people to, decide to bail on the whole product because they look simply at the amount of downloads something's getting or the views. And, I know for us, and just when we first started, it was frustrating because the only reference point that you have is those mega, podcasts out there. The Joe Rogans are up, where you're at in Philly, the Kelsey's podcast, it's everywhere. Yeah. But you're not going to, that should be the last thing you guys should be looking at when starting a podcast.
Yeah, it's not an entertainment vehicle, right? It's marketing. It's not do you want to be educational? Do you want to be informative? And maybe do you want to entertain a little bit? I'd love to crack a joke on the show. Why not? But from the standpoint, it is you're doing this for your business and you need to figure out, okay, how is this going to help your business directly? Like, what are the real things that you're doing this show to do to support your business? And as long as it's doing those things to start, and that's why you're building the show, then yeah, that is the value, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people know this. You probably do. But like, if you have maybe 28 listeners, you're in literally the top 50% of podcasts.
Right.
28, which everyone's gonna be like, what do you mean? But that's the thing. There's so many shows out there, so many shows, like it's so much to dig through and it's hard to get attention. And so it shouldn't be about that. Like for me, I only had maybe 120 total downloads in the first month of my podcast that I just put out a month and a half ago. But I got over 100 posts. I got over 15K in engagement. And I had somebody DM me on Instagram that I hadn't talked to in 4 years. And they said, hey, Vince, I'm interested in starting a podcast. Can we get a call? And so that's it. You know what I mean? Like that's everything that I needed to do in this moment. Am I going to fine tune stuff about my funnels and my calls to action and how everything, can be repurposed even further on the different platforms that I use? Like, yeah, absolutely. But at first it was just like, I want to post a ton on all my socials. I want to make that process a whole lot simpler. I want to get more attention as a result of that. And I want to get people calling me. And it did all of that. So it's like, okay, this is great. So those are the kinds of goals that you want. Like if you can finish a month of podcasting and go, I had 45-minute conversations that were really engaging with 5 different people that I think can be a customer for me. And they were good, authentic connections. And I'm going to maintain those. Yep. If that's not a win, I don't know what is, right? Like that's the game. So I think it's always, what are these easy wins and what do I care about versus these entertainers who need the hundreds of thousands. Otherwise they're not making any money. They have nothing to sell.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, talking about those 100 posts that you got out that month, like that's where it is for, on the marketing side. I think if I can spend, if the time that I'm investing in it is the conversation, and then being able to pull out all those content pieces, all the engagement that those get, like you have to factor that into the success of the podcast. Is what did all the the bolt-on type marketing, what did that do for you?
Yeah, because all this stuff, I mean, especially real estate, right? You're talking big swings. Like for a lot of people, when you sell a house, like how much are you getting out of that? Okay, great. If you spend, let's say, $12,000 in a year on your podcast and you sell one house as a result of that, you netted $8,000, right? Like, so it's just, those are the kinds of things. And that's what a lot of people do in any industry. Like a lot of coaches and stuff, what they do is they podcast because the idea is I have a high ticket item that I'm looking to sell. I have this, like my hourly for coaching is great. I keep people on a retainer, whatever it is. I've got courses that I sell. People do all of it with the idea that you're going to sell these high ticket things to small and dedicated audiences. And if you're just getting a handful of sales in a full year, then you've made your money back and then some. And so like, then you can reinvest in the show and you can do other things that make your life easier, that can take other responsibilities off of your plate. You can reinvest it back into the business. So that's the approach that people take in really every industry, especially the solopreneur types where you're dealing with your customers head on. And that's where it's really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've talked a lot about the repurposing of the content. And so I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that when you are doing your podcast, do it on video too. So you're able to get that, your face out there in that content.
Oh, video's everything. And here's the cool thing too, because so many people might say like, I can't deal with YouTube. I don't want to manage a channel. I don't want to do all the video. I need all the graphics. This is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be so expensive. Like it could be, right? Like there's simple ways to do it, but it might be really expensive to get it where you want it to be. That's okay. One of the things that I've even found is as like a shortcut, if you will, for people who are just getting started, audio show video clips. And so, record the whole thing in video, whether it's on Zoom, it's on Google Meet. There's services like StreamYard and whatever. Like there's a million different things that you can use that are very affordable or free, right? So record the show, know that it's an audio show. Maybe tell your guests though, if you're going to tell them it's recording for video, give them the heads up. But just you say, hey, all I need is 2 1-minute sound bites out of this that are video. That is easy enough to cut. And you don't have to worry about all the other production work. You can still have the podcast. It's covering all your channels, doing everything you need to do. So like, there's definitely ways to be very smart about it. But nobody's watching an audiogram on Instagram. It's just, it's not happening. Nobody's doing that anymore. It's too active. It's too busy. Even the pictures these days are carousels. So you're going to hit one, you're going to slide 6 times. So even when it's a picture and it's not a moving picture, it's a moving picture. So like you just got to find video and get ways to work it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and tools to do that. I mean, like we're using to record this Riverside. This is a fantastic tool. I started using it probably not quite a year ago. And, the advancement it's made, and I've been doing our podcast for about 4 years. So I've always edited on other platforms, but the tools that this thing has is insane. To be able to cut the 1-minute clips and have your own branding and have like all the captions and everything, like it does it all for you quickly.
No, Riverside is a gift. And for people who really want to go for it and have a commitment or have been committed to a show and are looking to do it, like that is literally what I use in my studio. Like we do the same exact thing. So honestly, when you sent me the link to this and it was Riverside, I was like, thank God. So I love that. And it gives you the transcripts too. So yeah, for the foundation of all those things that you can do for repurposing, like this is a great step one of just record it on Riverside. You get better recordings. It's built for, audio and video. It's a better quality than Zoom and Google Meets and all of that. You do have to pay a price, but again, for the things that you get, it's worth it. So, it's a simple investment. It's a valuable investment. And when you're thinking about the time you save with all your marketing, like this is it. It's a great value. So yeah, love Riverside.
Yeah. What, for the people that you've worked with and the entrepreneurs that you've worked with to start their podcast, what was, how did that, what was their realization like when, you kind of got into the show and you got them up and running and they were able to see all the different, the places that their podcast could take them for their business, but then even, the amount of content that they were creating?
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity that it gets for people when they really are in it and actually doing the show with us is pretty cool because they get shocked with, I had times, for example, I took over a show that it's more altruistic, but it was a very involved show. It's all about metaverse technology. And as I'm working on this show, initially the marketing person was doing like 20 hours a week managing this show. The production schedule was hectic. The quality wasn't great ultimately that was being put out. And so to be able to have it, so for us, like we have an engineer sit in on Riverside, so they'll manage the whole thing. So you don't even have to think about that. If tech stuff goes wrong, they can walk your guests through it. We help you with scheduling all the appointments. So to be able to just go, I can really more or less focus on being a great host and making sure that I'm executing the content on a high level and then just giving some direction on these are the kinds of guests I want. And like, that's about it. It just makes it, it's so much simpler, so much easier. The time they get back into their business, the stress that gets removed from it. And it does get to a point where you can talk about like business issues, right? Like we talked about a little bit earlier, at times where people, they don't know what their audience is or, and the way I'll see that is the message is inconsistent. Like they're going to be doing one thing that is talking to an owner. They're going to do another thing that's talking to the employees, but the owner's their client, not the employees. So you have to go about that differently, right? It should be a full-on commitment to the actual kind of client that you're looking for. So you get to see this stuff and getting that outside perspective of people that are professionals in it, giving you an eye on it, and being able to just go back to all the work that you have to do because it is exhausting. I mean, my business is me and one other person. Like we have other people that help us out, but I've had to deal with the books. I've had to deal with doing sales calls, invoicing. You got to deal with, if we want to upgrade our email signatures and the website and come up with marketing handouts. It's like, I don't got time for stuff. You know what I mean? Like this is so much work. Doing my own show is hard work. So to be able to have people like simplify, it's a huge relief to them. And then honestly, it gives them clarity on the business and like the kinds of things that they need to tighten up.
So by being able to, giving people the ability to really kind of, get their time back to be able to like really focus in on being that great host, what are some of your tips for, leading a good interview? Because I think that is like people get into it and, they might have their list of questions and they're so like bogged down in their list of questions that they're not listening or, it can just get really overwhelming if you've never done those kind of things before.
Yeah, preparation is key, right? So, you want to have, and actually, let me take it back a step even further. Something I mentioned earlier, being genuinely interested, right? Like first off, have somebody on that you actually want to talk to because if you're just going, I got this person on and like they're doing this thing, I don't know if they're actually good at it. Like, don't do that then. Don't have them on, honestly, if you really don't want to talk to them. But have a genuine interest, prepare, come up with, I like to it's sort of tier questions that I have. Like, these are the things that I must ask. These are things that I could ask. And these are things that we probably won't even have the time for. But if it comes down to it, like, here's some things that I might get into. And when you have that flexibility, that's going to give you freedom to say, there's only 3 questions that are like super important. And you can read the room and their flow and their energy and say, oh, well, I really hit on something here. Let me ask them a follow up on that and let's dig a little bit deeper. Or they said something that I think is really interesting and valuable to my audience, so I'm going to dig deeper into that. So like that kind of thing is huge. And then beyond that, I mean, when you're trying to get to know somebody, I think a lot of times what happens is people tend to ascribe their emotions and their opinions into the question. And so they'll be like, did that scare you when that happened? And the guest will be like, well, I wasn't scared at all. Honestly, it just felt like it was the most natural thing in the world for me to do. So now they've spent the first 15 seconds of your question actually fighting your question and then having to drive it somewhere where it actually makes sense to them and their experience. Like, don't limit these people in that way. Don't force your emotion. Just go, so how did you feel when that happened? What did that mean to you to see that result? You know what I mean? And like that kind of flexibility, because then you actually understand who the person is, what they're about, what they care about, the way they saw these moments or the way they developed these opinions. And it gives you the opportunity to then take it to a deeper level faster, which is going to educate your audience or entertain your audience even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is the whole, the whole topic of podcasting for your business. There's so much that you can like get into and really dive into. First off, I want to ask you, where can people follow you and learn more? Because, you have so many great videos and episodes and things out there for people that, are in the real estate space that want to listen to more and kind of learn as they go along. I think your platform is a great one for that.
Thank you. So yeah, I have my own podcast. It's called It's Not Just Talking with Vince Quinn. So I think I even said it earlier. Like, it is the truth. So I hear that all the time. It drives me nuts. It's not just talking. So that's the show. If you want to subscribe, and like I said, 10-minute episodes, very simple and effective stuff, things you can implement. And I do that every single week. So you can subscribe to that. And then otherwise, you can go to SBX Prod on newsletter, like Productions, but it stops at the D. So SBX Prod, we've got a newsletter you can sign up for, follow us for clips and regular information that way. So we're super active, and it's basically our website, even though we have a website. So SBX Prod on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I do really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I think it is, one of your videos, or it was either the video or Instagram post. It was talking about, podcasting. It's not the future. It's right now. If you're not doing it, like this is the time that you should be creating those podcasts for your content marketing.
Yeah, the numbers of listeners is only going up. More and more people are getting acclimated one way to another. But I think so many people got burned out from, as soon as it was accessible, trying the shows and the shows not being successful, that everybody wants to be a part of it or has been a part of it, but now they're not podcasting. So there's not a growing number of podcasts percentage-wise with your listeners. Like, there is opportunity. Get in there, get the word out, and do a pilot first. Please do a pilot first. But yeah.
Awesome. I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. This was fun.
I want to thank Vince for joining us today and really believe real estate professionals should be leveraging podcasting as a lead generation tool and way to provide more valuable content to position themselves as a market leader. Remember, if you're interested in launching your own podcast or looking for tips to improve one, be sure to check out Vince's podcast, It's Not Just Talking. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an incredible story or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com.
Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.